All right, today we are diving into a framework for conflict that is, well, thousands of years old, brutally effective, and designed for one thing: winning. Seriously, this isn't about finding a middle ground or making friends. This is a cold, calculated guide to getting exactly what you want straight from an ancient master of the game. So, where does all this come from? Our source is Kautilya's Arthashastra. It's an ancient Indian text on statecraft, economics, military strategy, the whole shebang. And it's so famous for its ruthless pragmatism that Kautilya's other name, Chanakya, is basically the Indian equivalent of calling someone Machiavellian. This is a playbook for people who know that power isn't just given to you, it has to be taken. And Kautilya really doesn't waste any time setting the tone. When he talks about just and deserved punishment, you've got to understand he's not talking about what's right or wrong. He's talking about the calculated use of power. If you're too soft, people walk all over you. Too harsh, and they hate you. But that perfect, precise application of power, that's what gets you respect. And that idea is really at the heart of this entire philosophy. And that brings us to the core question that the Arthashastra is trying to answer. Think about it. It doesn't matter if you're a king trying to build an empire, a CEO in the middle of a hostile takeover, or just someone in a really high-stakes negotiation. The problem is always the same. When the objective is everything, how do you make sure you win? Well, the answer Kautilya gives us is a system called the Four Upayas, which just means the four strategies. And I want you to think of it like a ladder. You always start on the very first rung, the easiest, cheapest option. And you only climb higher if and only if the step before it has failed. Each step up that ladder means you're getting more aggressive, more costly, and a lot more decisive. So here they are. This is our roadmap, the four rungs of the ladder of power. First, you have Sama, the offer of peace. If that doesn't work, you move to Dana, using gifts or bribes. Still no luck? Then comes Bheda, sowing division and chaos. And finally, the last resort, Danda, pure, simple force. Okay, let's break these down one by one. We're starting at the bottom of the ladder with step 1, Sama, or conciliation. You can think of this as the velvet glove. It's the most civilized approach, it costs you the least, and for any smart strategist, it is always the first move. Now, Sama isn't just about being nice for the sake of it. No, it's a strategic operation. The Arthashastra is very clear on this. You are actively trying to persuade your opponent by appealing to their logic and, more importantly, their own self-interest. You're trying to show them how working together is a win for everybody. And the process itself is highly calculated. You praise their good qualities, you find any common ground you can, you frame the whole deal as a win-win. Kautilya even suggests saying things like, what I am, you are, to create this almost mystical sense of a shared destiny. This is your attempt to win without a fight, to get what you want with words alone, because that is always, always the most efficient way to win. But what happens when words fail? Well, if conciliation gets you nowhere, you climb to the next rung. Step 2, Dana. This is where you find out the price of compliance. Okay, so this is where we see a huge shift from persuasion to pure transaction. Your opponent has rejected your perfectly reasonable offer. Fine. The next question becomes, what do they want? Is it money, a promotion, a tax break? Dharana is basically the art of bribery, just in its most sophisticated form. It's all about figuring out your opponent's price and then just paying it to get them out of your way. And that's the cold, hard logic, isn't it? The entire conversation has changed. We're not talking about a shared future anymore. We're just making a deal. You give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. It's a pragmatic, almost cynical recognition that sometimes self-interest, usually financial, is a much stronger motivator than reason. But what happens if they refuse the money? This is where things take a much, much darker turn. If peace has failed and bribery has been turned down, you have to climb to step 3, Bheda. This isn't negotiation anymore. This is psychological warfare. It's the art of destroying your opponent from the inside out. The goal of Bheda is to completely shatter your opponent's power base, to break all their alliances. You stop seeing them as one solid group. Instead, you see them as a collection of individuals with their own fears, their own rivalries, their own suspicions, and you exploit every single one of those weaknesses. You turn their allies against them, you create paranoia and mistrust, and you make absolutely sure that when you finally make your move, they are standing completely alone. This quote right here perfectly captures the tactical genius of Bheda. See, you don't attack your opponent's core power directly. That's messy and difficult. No, instead, you peel away their support system from the outside in. You win over their weaker allies, their supporters on the fringe. Because once you crack the foundation, the center just can't hold. The whole thing collapses on its own. And Kautilya is incredibly specific that this order of escalation really matters. He calls it the analoma, or the natural order. You use the softer methods, conciliation and gifts, on people who are closer to you, like citizens or allies. And you save the harder methods, division and force, for your real enemies. To just jump straight to force, what he calls the pratiloma, or unnatural order, is the mark of an amateur. It's inefficient, it's expensive, and it creates enemies you didn't need to have. But, sometimes every other method fails. The peace talks go nowhere, the bribes are refused, and your opponent's alliances, somehow, hold strong. Then and only then do you escalate to the final top rung of the ladder. Step 4, Danda, the iron fist. There's really no ambiguity here, is there? Danda is the use of coercive force. In Kautilya's world, that meant armies, plunder, assassination. It is the final tool you use to get what you want when every other path has been closed off. It's a cold recognition that some fights can only and will only be settled through total domination. And this is absolutely crucial. In the Kautilyan framework, Danda is not a crime of passion. It is not about anger or revenge. It is the cold, logical final move in a long strategic aim. It's a tool, and it's meant to be used dispassionately and decisively, but only when the cost-benefit analysis shows that it's the only option left for victory. So let's pull all this together. What is the fundamental logic that's really driving this ruthless 4-step framework? Well, it really boils down to a few core ideas. First, you always start with sama, conciliation, because words are cheap and surprisingly effective. Second, you only escalate when a lower step has absolutely failed. Third, you use Bheda, division, to isolate your opponent to dismantle their support network before you deliver the final blow. And most importantly, you have to remember that this entire system is built for one thing and one thing only, victory. It's not about fairness, it's not about justice, it is about getting and keeping power. Period. Look, the Arthashastra was written for kings and conquerors over 2,000 years ago, but the logic of this 4-step ladder, conciliation, gifts, division, and force, it's timeless. Just look around. You see it in international diplomacy, in corporate boardrooms, even in political campaigns. This ruthless ladder of power is absolutely everywhere. The only real question is, now that you know how to spot it, where are you going to see it next?